Hi, welcome to SBR.TV as we continue our College Bowl betting previews with Justin Seven. I'm Peter Loshak. Well, we're coming down to the wire in the bowl games now, and right now we're going to look at the post-January 1st games leading up to the BCS Championship. So let's start with probably the biggest and most controversial of this segment of games, and that's Boise State and TCU. Many people, of course, were disappointed by this matchup. TCU in particular was not looking for a rematch with Boise State, but they should be, sufficiently motivated anyway. In their bowl game last year, TCU was a 3.5-point favorite. They won 17-16, but that score was a bit misleading. TCU dominated that game in a lot of statistical categories, and this year TCU is arguably significantly better than they were last year. Both teams, of course, are great and have strengths all around and few weaknesses, but TCU looked particularly dominant this year, blowing out the top teams, BYU and Utah, as well as all the lesser opponents that they faced. A negative for Boise State to keep in mind will also be that their star receiver Austin Pettis has a leg injury, and he'll be a game-time decision. He probably will be hobbled if he does play. But the main question here is does TCU really outclass Boise State this year by a touchdown? So what do you think of that, Justin?
All right, I made the fair line on this game, TCU minus 6.5. This game is kind of a goofy one. Both of them had fairly easy schedules. I like to use Sagarin ratings are a nice way to look at some other things you're considering. In addition to your own model, it's good to get other perspectives. And if you look at, especially with strength of schedules, and Boise State had the 98th most difficult, or rather one of the easiest schedules in the country. TCU was 82. So they had an easy schedule also, but it was considerably harder. But that said, even including that, I made TCU a 6.5-point favorite. So based on my model, I'm not too interested in it. Total, I made 58. So, I mean, no great value there. But if you look at Sagarin ratings, one thing I've noticed, when you're looking at good teams that play consistently, and I would consider both of these teams good, consistent teams, the Sagarin ratings are pretty good at picking the line out, and with those ratings, it only makes TCU a 3-point favorite. So, although I'm probably not going to bet this, if I did, I would definitely take Boise State.
That's interesting. So what do you make of the fact that TCU dominated both BYU and Utah? I mean, when you give a once-over to TCU's record this year, you sort of gloss over their wins over the subpar teams they played and kind of maybe even subconsciously throw them out. But you really take note of the blowout wins over the good teams. Those are looking really impressive when you look down their roster of games. So when you're evaluating a season-long performance like this, are games like that more telling of a team like TCU's true ability than the rest of the games where they far outclass their opponents? And maybe do you want to ignore those games a bit and focus more on how they did against the best teams they played?
No, I disagree, Peter. I think you need to look at all the games. If you're only considering their games, how well they played against the premier teams, you're cutting your sample size down, 2/3. So if a third of their games are competitive, 2/3 are cream puffs, even the cream puffs tell you something about the team. Are they going to average 6 yards a play or 7? Well, that's a huge difference in terms of future predictability, and you need to look at how competitive these teams were when you beat them by 6 or 7 yards a play. So it's no, I don't think you can just ignore the cream puffs.
All right, great. And moving along, let's talk about Iowa and Georgia Tech now. This is a game that I'm very curious to see what you have to say and what lines your model gives. It's a tough game to cap because both teams play such drastically different styles. Iowa, of course, is a defense-oriented team with a relatively conservative offense, and Georgia Tech wins with their powerful triple option attack that they run, probably better than anyone else in the country, or at least run it with better athletes than anyone else. These are two teams that we followed very closely on SBR during the regular season. Iowa in particular was definitely a team that seemed to constantly outperform their expectations. They seemed to burn a lot of sharp money that bet against them during the year. And then at the end of the year, Iowa did fade, but that probably had a lot to do with a few injuries that they were dealing with, particularly to starting quarterback Ricky Stanzi. For this bowl, though, Stanzi will be back, as well as starting running back Adam Robinson. But the unusual style matchup makes this game really kind of hard to get a grip on. So I'm curious to see what your model has to say about it.
Well, you need to look. You really hit one of the key points in that Iowa looked like they were a much weaker team in the last 3 games without Stanzi. And if you look at I look at 2 things. I'm looking at a quarterback, Vanderbug or whatever the hell his name is. There's the college pass efficiency. There's 2 formulas for NFL. There's NFL passer efficiency. There's a different one for college passer efficiency, which is a little bit more generous. Stanzi had a passer efficiency rating of 131. His backup was a 90. So you see this huge drop in passing performance. If you look at the average points the backup put up, he was only putting in about 12 points a game. It looks higher than that because his defense was scoring some. So there's a huge discrepancy in the quarterbacks, and I actually made it an 8-point difference in having your starter back. So with their starter back, I made the fair line in this game, Iowa +2. So it's, Iowa's the right side, which is a rare thing for me to say because I don't think I've ever bet Iowa in the last couple of years. But just a small play. But I think the more interesting play is taking the over. I made, with the returning starters, I'm just double checking one number here. Yeah. With the returning starters, I made this total 68. So this is almost an automatic computer play. It's this far. If I were getting 48, I would play it without even thinking. It's just an automatic fire away 60% type play. It's not quite there yet, but there's a good chance I'm going to take the over in this one.
I'm sorry, wow, did you say 68 was your total for this one? So is this going to be a huge play for you?
Now, anytime my indicator is 20 points off, it's an automatic fire Godzilla play. And it's not quite 20 points off, it's 18. So if this total dropped 2 points, I'd be mortgaging the house to bet on it.